All right, so let's now take you to this developing story. ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa has penned a scathing letter to DA Leader John Steenhuisen, accusing him of shifting goalposts in negotiations over cabinet positions. In a letter seen by the SABC, Ramaphosa says he informed Steenhuisen that they found the letter from DA Federal Chairperson Helen Zille offensive, condescending and inconsistent with the Constitution. The DA was demanding 11 ministers and deputy and wanting to fire director generals in those positions full, rather. Ramaphosa in the letter further says the DA has been disruptive and uncooperative in the negotiations, unlike other parties. Ramaphosa says he believes the DA has jeopardized the foundation of setting up a government of national unity by moving the goalposts in a letter of 24 June 2024 written by John Steenhuisen to him. Now, the ANC president says he is truly taken aback by how the DA now wants 2 more portfolios to bring their portfolios to 8. The president further says the latest proposals by the DA do not align with the principles adopted and encapsulated in the statement of intent. Ramaphosa further alludes that the DA proposals that have been submitted undermines the process that they had committed to following open, grounded, consistent, constitutionally compliant engagements, honoring the collective understanding of our goal to create a government that reflects the will of the people. President Ramaphosa says he intends to conclude all negotiations and consultations this week. Let's now take this further and bring in our politics reporter, Samkele Maseko. Samkele, good afternoon to you. Of course, I've just received this letter myself. And I mean, it is quite scathing, it is lengthy, and it is also very detailed. Now, what can we read into this letter, particularly as we're hearing, of course, that the FedEx of the Democratic Alliance will also be meeting this afternoon? One can only assume it is in regards to this letter.
What we can read into this letter of the President of the African National Congress is that essentially he is now fed up with the Democratic Alliance and how the negotiations are being held. For instance, you see in the letter that they find that the letter written by Helen Zille to the Secretary General of the ANC, Fikile Mbalula, was condescending, unconstitutional, and quite right, offensive in the letter there penned by the President of Cyril Ramaphosa. As I quote from this particular letter, he goes further to say that unfortunately, this has not been the case with the DA. It's been in its recent proposals. I believe the DA has jeopardized the foundation of setting up a government of national unity by moving goalposts. In your letter of the 24th of June 2024 to me, I am truly taken aback by how you want 2 more portfolios to bring the DA's portfolios to 8. You have said you would have liked new portfolios to be allocated to the DA out of the options of sports, arts and culture, agriculture, rural development and land reform, or public service and administration. You go on to say that you are certain that assigning 2 additional portfolios to the DA, which you take to your quantum and cabinet from 6 to 8, would satisfy clause 16 of the statement of intent by better reflecting the will of the people as expressed in the electoral outcomes, while also taking into account the national interest. I regard your approach on moving the goalpost as a continuation of what was articulated in your federal chair's letter of the 22nd of June 2024 on issues such as sealed mandates of ministries, through which the DA seemed to want to set up a parallel government that would operate outside of the framework of the parameters of the constitution-based method and protocols of running the government of the Republic of South Africa. I also prefer not to deal further with the legally incompetent proposals to unilaterally redetermine contractual arrangements of director generals and their contracts. I did inform you that I felt we should not dwell on the misguided proportions contained in that letter, as paying attention to the contents of that letter would divert us from the task at hand of constituting a government of national unity. Essentially, the president of the ANC is pretty much fed up with the Democratic Alliance, saying that they are not negotiating in good faith, and they essentially want to set up a parallel government within the executive of the country. Unati.
Very interesting, Samkele. I mean, I'm also reading, of course, that the president further says that the latest proposal by the DA do not align with the principles adopted and encapsulated in the statement of intent. Now, of course, one also has to read into this, because it would seem that particularly the DA and the ANC are in two minds in as far as, their understanding of the statement of intent, because that is why we are here, which is why then the president is saying that he is taken aback by the ongoing, correspondence by the DA. So now the meeting of the DA is happening today. What is at stake here, Samkele? What are we likely to see? The Democratic Alliance holding a special federal executive meeting later today. Of course, it will be chaired by Helen Zille herself.
In essence, what we are seeing here is that the Democratic Alliance is wanting the Department of Trade and Industry. This whole deal with the ANC and the DA hinges around the Department of Trade and Industry. That is what the Democratic Alliance wants. Even in the letter of John Steenhuisen to the president of the ANC, you can see right at the end that they want another ministry that would augment the elimination or the moving out of the Department of Trade and Industry from the Democratic Alliance, which would mean the DA is essentially eyeing the economic cluster of the country. Hence, you are seeing the rand thus not performing well today after those murmurs of the DA dumping out of or dumping the GNU, and thus the rand may not be performing optimally, and thus many may be seeing that those whom are behind the rand may be seeing that the DA is ultimately the one that is trusted by those who hold the capital markets within the country. Thus, this letter by the president of the African National Congress essentially saying that we can't only be negotiating with you, the Democratic Alliance, we've been negotiating with other political formations. For instance, you go to this letter here. To date, quote, to date, our discussions with the DA, the PA, the IFP, GOOD, PAC, UDM, Al-Jamaa, Freedom Front Plus, and Rise Mzansi have been geared towards building a consolidating the government of national unity. Towards the end of the letter, Unati, the president clearly says that I advise you that we are continuing to hold discussions with other parties over portfolios they could occupy as we seek to finalize the agreement of the GNU, essentially saying that the portfolios the Democratic Alliance wants are not cast in stone to the DA. They are subject to negotiations and deliberations with other political formations, and the DA cannot dictate what happens within the GNU. So essentially, the president is saying that whether you are on board or you are not on board, we are continuing with the formation of the government of national unity. You are not the only cog that can ultimately make this vehicle to move from point A to point B. There are other components that need to be catered for.
That statement is also telling in terms of those conversations with other members of the GNU. Those conversations are now being ramped up, we understand, according to reports. Now, essentially, as we look at the GNU, in the event that, for instance, the DA does in effect walk away, what are the prospects for the ANC? Of course, we are also understanding that there are talks with the EFF, possible the MK party too, but essentially the ANC only needs one other smaller party, right, to form that majority that it would need. But just paint the picture for us, Samkele, in terms of what are we looking at if the DA does, in a sense, pull away?
The reality is the economic freedom fighters are lurking in the wings. They are literally at the gate. They just want the gate to be opened for them. But with the gate being open for them, they want the Freedom Front Plus out. They want the Democratic Alliance out. So ultimately, with the DA leaving, it would open up the gate slightly for the economic freedom fighters to come through. You've already seen the PAC, you've already seen UDM, you've already seen Rise Mzansi coming on board. You've also seen the ANC also speaking with Herman Mashaba's Action SA, where you had Michael Baumann saying that they had very fruitful engagements with the African National Congress and they would play an opposition role within the National Assembly. So you've also got other political formations that are eyeing this particular pie and wanting a taste of it, despite them not overtly coming out and saying they want it. So ultimately, the Action SA's biggest opponent in this particular GNU is they don't want to work with the DA because they feel betrayed by the Democratic Alliance. The EFF does not want the DA because the DA declared them as enemy number one. The EFF does not want Freedom Front Plus because they perceive them as the oppressors within the country. So ultimately, you do have the EFF lurking in the wings. you've got Panyaza Lesufi, you've got TK Ngiza in Gauteng, who are ultimately saying that the DA does not want you as the ANC, so why go and force yourself on people who don't want you and who want to micromanage you on the basis of the color of their skin? That is essentially what some of the leaders of the ANC are saying within the structures of the governing party. And then you've got MK Party, where you've got a number of ANC leaders whom have been tasked to engage with the former president to go to a province like KwaZulu-Natal. The former deputy chair of the province and former premier of the province, Wilson Mchunu, he has also been engaging with the former president. We are also told that there are engagements of ANC officials with the former President Jacob Zuma on these particular matters pertaining to governance within the country and what role the MK Party will play in the National Assembly or in government. We've also got an ANC coalition policy document which says the biggest political party in a municipality, in a province, must have first preference to form a government. And that will essentially mean that the ANC has violated its own coalition arrangements in the province of KwaZulu-Natal by not allowing the MK Party, since it is the biggest with 45%, to constitute a government first, that they invite other political parties to negotiate with the MK Party, as opposed to the government of provincial unity within that party, which is against the current ANC coalition framework in that particular province, knowing that MK Party is the biggest. And already you are seeing cracks within that government of provincial unity, where the NFP is complaining of the acts of the IFP in the Zululand district municipality, which seeks to replace the former mayor of that particular district, Reverend Thulasizwe Simelane. Buthelezi, rather.
Well, cracks are abound indeed, Samkele. Thank you so much for that, political reporter Samkele Maseko there of the SABC, of course, just commenting there on the back of that letter that was penned by ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa to DA Leader John Steenhuisen, as of course we still wait and are no closer to understanding what is happening with regards to the government of national unity. But of course, one can only make assertions at this point in terms of what are we likely to see once those agreements then are in place.